Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Stark Contrast podcast. I'm Zack Stark here with my partner, Mas Verducci. This is our first episode. So, for a little overview of what we're going to be talking about, we'll be talking about mainly football, but since it's going into the off season, we'll be talking about other sports such as basketball, baseball, soccer, and possibly hockey.
All right. I'm Mas Verducci, as Zach said. I'm going to be the co-host, and I'm just excited to get started. As Zach mentioned, we're going to start off with football, but I'm excited to cover all sports and kind of get into some natural heated debate, as me and Zach always do. So I'm ready to get started.
All right. So, first topic we're going to start with is just from the end of the season with the little Super Bowl 58 recap. It was a great game, started a little slow, but obviously went into overtime. Only the second game, second Super Bowl in history to go to overtime. And this is the third Chiefs Super Bowl in the last 5 years. So, Mas, do you think this Chiefs team is a dynasty at this point?
The answer is yes. There's no other way to look at it. I mean, the Chiefs, as you said, they won 3 Super Bowls in the past 5 years. They've been to four in the last 5 years, and in the past 6 years, they've made it to the AFC Championship each year. Mahomes has done it with and without Tyreek Hill. This team has done it with a bunch of different players, and at this point, you got to call them a dynasty. The 1990s Cowboys won 3 Super Bowls. They're called the dynasty. The Chiefs won 3 Super Bowls in the past 5 years. They're a dynasty.
I completely agree. I feel like three Super Bowls in half a decade gives them that title. Any other team in history that's done it has also been given that title. So that kind of segues into my next question of how close do you think Mahomes is to Brady in the GOAT conversation, given what he's done in this short time in his career?
I still don't think he can shine Tom Brady's shoes. I think that even though Mahomes has proven to be a winner, he has not won for the duration that Tom Brady has. And just because of that, he's not even close in the GOAT conversation because Tom Brady did it over and over and over again for years. And I'm going to make the argument that Tom Brady did it with lesser equipped teams than what Mahomes has been doing it with.
Interesting. Well, Mahomes this year, aside from Travis Kelsey, didn't really have that many weapons. And when we look at Tom Brady, yeah, he probably didn't have the greatest weapons, but he still had Gronk, who many think is better than Travis Kelsey, Julian Edelman, who was maybe not a clear cut number one receiver, but a guy who won a Super Bowl MVP. And also, back in the day, he did have guys like Wes Welker and Randy Moss, even though he didn't win a Super Bowl with them. But I feel like this year, with Mahomes' talent at the receiver position, that I'm not sure you can really make that argument that Brady had more, um, lesser equipped receivers. So
I think Pacheco's a dog, and I think he had a big role to play in the Chiefs' road to the Super Bowl and Super Bowl win. Although he did not have his best performance in the Super Bowl, he's a dog, and I don't think that Tom Brady ever really had a very strong running back. And I have very high marks for Pacheco. He's a Rutgers boy. Um, I think that that's something. Brady did not really have like a pounding running back. He had Leonard Fournette with the Bucks, I believe,
yeah,
but I don't know. I'm just a huge Pacheco fan. I think he played a huge role. And in addition, I think the Chiefs defense was pretty solid, to be honest. Brady, he always had a solid defense, but I think the Chiefs defense this year specifically is better than something Brady ever had.
that is a good point. I see where you're coming from now. Brady had those kind of tandem running back crews and never really that RB1 powerhouse guy that stood out from the rest. So going back to the game itself, who do you think is to blame for the 49ers? Because I didn't feel like they played bad. I feel like in the end they just came up short.
I think the 49ers are an extremely talented team. On paper, they are still, in my opinion, the most talented league in the football league. However, clearly something did not click. I thought that their number one strength all year, above their entire roster, was their coaching. They outcoached the Dallas Cowboys and the Green Bay Packers to make it to that championship game and made it to the Super Bowl. I thought their coaching was absolutely excellent, and I attribute a lot of their success up until the Super Bowl to their coaching. However, in the Super Bowl, Andy Reid came out on top, and I would say that the coaching was part of the problem in that Super Bowl game.
Yeah, I can agree with that to an extent. I also think that there was some letdowns on the offensive side of the football, and that's what gave Mahomes the chance to really work his magic um, early on with fumbles and everything like that, and the Chiefs' defense really stifling them. I thought like Trent Williams, he had two really crucial fouls or penalties early on in the game, which you don't see from an All Pro tackle, future Hall of Famer, and also that their number one guys like George Kittle, Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, they didn't really get into the rhythm of the game like I would have expected. I thought the MVP from the 49ers was Juwan Jennings, a, a wide receiver three, threw a touchdown, caught a touchdown. You got to have the big name players making the big name plays on the biggest stage. And I don't, so that does go back to the coaching aspect of it. I don't think Kyle Shanahan uh, prepared well enough on the offensive side of the ball, which is very rare because he usually does. And he is probably the best offensive coach in the league. He's a system coach, a scheme coach, and I just feel like at that end of the game, going into overtime, Andy Reid outcoached him. So
I agree 1,000% with everything you said. To be honest, coaching, being outcoached, and in addition to just the strength of the Chiefs' defense and their performance specifically in the first half, coming out and stunting that 49ers offense that was in such good rhythm, both schematically and just having talented players make big plays on their own. That 49ers offense was on absolute fire. And within the first half, the Chiefs defense completely halted them. McCaffrey, they're arguably their most important player. Uh, he is their most important player, and he fumbled the football in a big time game. So credit to the Chiefs defense and credit to their coaching staff for being well prepared and outdoing the 49ers, who I thought were the better team on paper.
so moving on to a big question here. Is Brock Purdy the guy for the 49ers? Is he the guy that's going to eventually bring a Super Bowl ring back to San Francisco with this ultra talented lineup?
You could make the argument that with the players around him, there's many quarterbacks in the National Football League that could have taken the 49ers to the Super Bowl. I've heard that argument. I understand that argument. But honestly, I think Brock Purdy, with who he is and his story and what he has done with San Francisco already, being Mr. Irrelevant and going this far, I would say that he is the guy just because of who he is as an individual and what he means to the city and the team. The team's identity is around all the key players that they have. And I would put Brock Purdy in that conversation of key players, along with Samuel and Kittle and all those other guys.
For me, look, I'm not a Brock Purdy hater. I have very mixed feelings about Brock Purdy. Um, I see where the system QB argument comes from. He does have a lot of
But
talent
wait,
around
what do you
him.
expect though? He's got Shanahan as the coach, and he's known for that schematic offense where you need a system quarterback. So with him as the coach and with the pieces you have around him, you need a system quarterback. Anybody who's going to play in that system is going to be titled a system quarterback, unless you throw maybe a running quarterback into that system that can create things out of nothing. But I don't know that that would even work. And Shanahan has his system. And although you can call him a system quarterback, he's the guy for that system.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing I was going to bring up is Brock Purdy wasn't essentially just given this job, right? Last year, obviously, lucky that Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo both got hurt. But then he went back into OTAs with Trey Lance, beat him out for the job, and then Trey Lance was traded away. Um, and that's a top 5 pick that he battled out and beat for the job. And then he put up MVP caliber numbers during the season. So, story's great. He worked his tail off and he got the starting job. And you can call him a system quarterback. I see the argument, but he is an elite quarterback. I'm not sure I'd put him up there with, you know, Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and some of those guys, but he's definitely in the top 10, arguably top 5. And I think he could bring a Super Bowl back to San Francisco. I think he has the talent and definitely the willpower to do so.
I agree with that final statement that you made there. 100%.
And lastly, where do we see these teams uh, finishing next season? Because in my opinion, I can definitely see a Super Bowl rematch if the majority of the pieces on both of these teams stay. They both have stellar offenses and stellar defenses, and they're definitely going to be battling for the 1 seed in their respective conferences.
Yeah, I think 100% you got to count on both of these teams making it to the playoffs. And regardless of where they finish in the regular season, you got to count on them performing in the playoffs because even though you could say the Chiefs did not have the best regular season performance this year, uh, they still made it all the way to winning the Super Bowl. And so if these two teams are going to make it to the playoffs, they're Super Bowl contenders automatically. There's teams that make the wild card that we're like, all right, they made the playoffs, but realistically, they have a really outside chance. If the 49ers and the Chiefs make the playoffs with the teams that they have right now, they're Super Bowl contenders no matter where they are in that playoff picture. They're Super Bowl contenders. They have veterans, they have players that have been there, they have unbelievable talent on both sides of the ball for both teams. And you can't count either of those teams out, regardless of their regular season performance, in my opinion.
Yeah, great points. In both conferences, AFC and NFC, what team do you see contending the most with these two teams?
That's a tough question. It's hard to tell at this point. Um, there's so many question marks still with the offseason. So it's really early to tell. But I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with the Philadelphia Eagles. And this is really
Really?
crazy. Yeah, this is crazy. I'm gonna say the Eagles. I'm a Cowboys fan. I despise the Eagles with every ounce of my heart, but I think they're gonna make a comeback. I hate Hurts, and I don't think he's an incredibly talented quarterback, but I think he has the willpower and I think he has the right attitude. And I don't think he's gonna let this team fall. So I'm going to give the Eagles the edge in the NFC. I don't think the Lions are going to be able to repeat what they did last year. The Cowboys are always a question mark, um, and every other team we just don't know yet. And then in the AFC, um,
I
I'll
don't.
go
I mean,
I'll go Buffalo.
you're gonna go Buffalo.
You got
I
to go
would.
Buffalo, I think.
I feel like the majority of people would lean Baltimore, but Lamar Jackson is not a good playoff QB. I will stand here, strong saying that, and that's not biased. That's not because I'm a Steelers fan.
Yeah,
Uh, I don't know if any quarterback can take on Mahomes. The one guy I see doing it is Josh Allen. They go head to
exactly.
head. They,
Even though the Bills are historically, haven't performed well against the Chiefs in
yeah,
recent history and just can't get over that hump of getting to the Super Bowl and, going all the way. I think they're going to do it at some point. With this team they have, it's still somewhat together, and we'll see what moves they make in the offseason. But one time Josh Allen has to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's got to be that one year that he surpasses Mahomes and makes it to the Super Bowl, and it could be this year. We'll see.
And going back on your point in the NFC, I'm gonna have to disagree on the Eagles take, um, because of coaching. Nothing to do with the talent on the team. I think it's great. Aside, on the defensive side of the ball, James Bradbury was an atrocity this year. But uh, the coaching, you saw Shane Steichen leave and the offense fumbles. You see Jonathan Gannon leave, the defense crumbles. Matt Patricia was terrible for them. So it just seemed like a total collapse within the organization there at the end of the year. And that is a huge problem to overcome, especially starting off next season. I
So,
think
what
they'll
team do you have then? What team do you have?
To me, I think it would be the Lions. I am a huge Dan Campbell fan. I love the way he coaches. They were ultimate underdogs this year. I don't think anybody is, not going to take them seriously next year just because of who they've been in the past. I think they have great talent. I think Jared Goff's an elite quarterback. They have a top five receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown, an amazing young tight end in Sam Laporta. The defense does concern me, especially that secondary. But if they can keep building that D line with Aiden Hutchinson, that's going to take a lot of pressure off of them. There just aren't many holes in the team. Their uh, their bond is great because of Dan Campbell. He's a morale coach. He rides with his guys. He's ride or die. That's the way Mike Tomlin coaches. Obviously, he's never had a losing season, and neither has Dan Campbell now. I don't think so because he went 9-8 last year. I'm pretty sure, and that was his first year.
Yeah.
So
I'm a fan of Campbell. I think he's an incredible coach. I'm a big fan of morale coaches, like you mentioned. And I think that that's what the Lions needed to get to where they got last year. Um, Again, I think it's going to be extremely difficult to repeat. The Packers are going to come into next season very hot, given what they did at the end of this season in, I would say, overachieving. The Bears are a question mark. You don't know where they're going, but you never know. And the Vikings are also a question mark. But I would say just in the division itself, the Packers are going to be a tough team to go up against. And the Lions historically don't do great against the Packers. Um, and then the other two teams are still a question mark. So you don't know. I think it's too early to tell, in my opinion, with the Lions. And then the other question mark is the Cowboys because obviously they were still a great team last year up until that game against Green Bay. And I'm a Cowboys fan, and trust me, I know every year it's the same thing, but
it was your year, right, Moss?
you always have that hope. You always have that hope that it might be the year. And as far as the Cowboys, man, we'll probably see them again in the playoffs, and we'll probably see them choke.
All right. Well, let's move on to some NFL Honors Awards recap. Um, this was a shaky year, in my opinion, in terms of the awards and who the AP voters gave those awards. Um, Starting with Kevin Stefanski for Coach of the Year, I completely disagree with this one because the Browns have had the same level of talent for years now, and yeah, they'll have one good year, and then they'll fall off the next year. And the expectation I feel like has been there for them in past years. So I'm not sure why the AP voters thought this year was so special from Kevin Stefanski. Um, I do see the argument with the injuries and stuff they had, but in my opinion, I thought what D'Amico Ryans did for the Texans was way more impressive. Taking a 3-win team that had the second overall pick and winning the division with rookies, um, C.J. Stroud and Tank Dell, and young guys with Nico Collins, and very little veterans. So, in my opinion, I would have given it to D'Amico Ryans.
You know what? I was thinking Shanahan, but I'm actually going to switch up and I'm going to agree with you. I think that what the Texans were able to do this year, given their personnel and their inexperience and their previous record last year, I would say absolutely. I honestly agree with you, and that's a coach that I overlooked and a team that I overlooked. But I'm going to go with the Texans as well, 100%.
Next question. So I agree with this, but I can see the argument for the contrary. Should Damar Hamlin have won the comeback player of the year given, the extent of his injury?
You want me to go first?
I can take it here.
All right, go for it.
So I get it. He went into cardiac arrest on the field and, nearly lost his life and obviously came back, which is an amazing feat to pull off. Like, it's great, especially for the city of Buffalo. But he had like less than 10 tackles the whole year, was a third string guy, missed a lot of games. And I feel like the comeback player of the year award has been defined by somebody's ability to make a comeback and produce at a high level. And given that, I don't think you can give it to Damar Hamlin, who barely played this year. And you saw a guy like Joe Flacco come off the couch mid-season and win a ton of games for the Browns and, get them that fifth seed with a 12-5 record and into the playoffs. So I would have also taken a guy like Baker Mayfield, who, was essentially on his last leg, like there down in Tampa. He was kind of just like a bridge quarterback for them. Before they maybe drafted somebody next year, and he had a phenomenal year. So I like production over the story. So that's my personal opinion.
Z, I like to disagree with you, but I'm going to agree with you again on this one. I'm going to say that Damar Hamlin, his story is incredible, and the courage it takes to come back to football after a traumatic experience like that, like we said, nearly life ending experience, he deserves to be honored. He deserves to be, um, you know, he's an inspiring story. However, I don't think that he should win the Comeback Player of the Year award. And I agree with Joe Flacco. I think that he should have won. And I think Baker Mayfield is a close second because he was with the Bucks the whole season. Flacco came in halfway through the year and did remarkable things with the Browns. But I would agree that Baker Mayfield is also one that we should highlight because he's definitely a close second in that race in my mind, given what he was able to do with the Bucks and take them all the way to the divisional round of the playoffs. It's pretty crazy.
All right. Now, the headline for me from the NFL awards ceremony was Miles Garrett winning DPOY over TJ Watt. This makes my blood boil. And I can talk your ear off about this because it disgusts me. Really. It disgusts me because basically what the AP voters have done is they said we're going to take advanced stats over production. And I completely disagree. TJ Watt cleared Miles Garrett in every category of defensive stats, and the AP voters went to the new advanced PFF stats, the double team rate and the pass rush win rate, and said that Miles Garrett was, more effective, which I don't agree with because Micah Parsons nearly had the same exact defensive stats on paper as Miles Garrett, but in those advanced stats, he had a higher double team rate and a higher pass rush win rate than Miles Garrett. So how are you going to say Miles Garrett gets it? TJ gets the second most votes, and then Micah Parsons has the third most votes. But then you're arguing that Miles Garrett should win it because of those PFF stats. When Micah really should win it if you're basing it off of that.
Well, thank you,
So,
Zay. So the caption should say, "Was Micah Parsons robbed of Defensive Player of the Year?" Then,
well, no, I'm just saying that the premise of their choice was unjustified. it really should be on production. Myles Garrett had 1 sack after Thanksgiving. TJ had 2 1/4 in the final game of the year.
See, I disagree with you. I'm sorry, I disagree.
He
I
had
agree
19
with you.
sacks compared to Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett's 14. He had 4 forced fumbles, so did Myles Garrett. TJ had more tackles, more fumble recoveries, more interceptions, and more touchdowns.
Z, you got to understand that Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons, as you said, both attracted more double teams. Teams are completely zoned in on Micah Parsons all season long. First of all, don't get me started. The guy was held 5 times a game, and the NFL did not
And
call
you
a
think
holding on.
TJ Moss, and you think
I think
TJ
until
wasn't
week 12, they did not call a holding call. I don't know what week it was, but it was late in the season. Let me tell you
Moss.
something. Micah
Linemen put
Parsons should have
TJ
won
Watt in a
Defensive Player of the
chokehold
Year.
when he rushes.
Zay, the same thing happens with Micah Parsons. And you can base it on production. That can be one of the points. But you also have to understand that because Micah Parsons is on the field, and Myles Garrett for that matter, but I'm gonna vouch for Micah Parsons. Because Micah Parsons is on the field, every other player on that line and on that defense for that matter is put in a better position to succeed. Deron Bland's put in a better position to succeed because Micah Parsons is putting
And
pressure. Quarterbacks are making shitty throws. Excuse
and
my
you don't
language.
and you don't think that goes for TJ? Alex Highsmith's production comes from TJ Watt. Cam Hayward's production comes from TJ Watt.
But Z, based on the statistics that you just mentioned about 5 minutes ago, you basically
Those
said Micah
those are
Parsons should.
those are two advanced stats that are uh, purely based off, the setup of the line. Right, the double team rate. And
Yeah,
then the win rate is just if they get through. That's not if they sack the quarterback.
right. Okay.
And that's not doing the job. Let me tell you. A sack goes on the stat sheet. A win does not go on the stat sheet. It goes to the whatever fairy dust fugazi
Okay.
PFF stats they got over there, trying to make these arguments for players because they're not putting those numbers on the stat sheet. That's just my personal opinion. A a big sack
So if you're
recipe,
basing it on stats, then why is Deron Bland not the defensive player of the year? Because your
because
basis is
did you see
your
what DK
basis is
Metcalf did
complete.
to him?
What?
I said, did you see what DK Metcalf did to him?
I did see, but
He's Trayvon Diggs from 2
TJ
years
Watt did
ago.
not play great every single game. There's games he
Yeah,
went.
he did.
No, he did not, Z. Not every player has a
The
great
guy
game every week.
averaged
And
more
Z,
than a
part of
sack
it
a
is also
game.
coaching. Part of it's coaching. Deron Bland may have not have been put in the best positions on some of those plays. In fact, on 2 of the plays that DK burnt him, it was not completely his fault. It's just you're looking at the play and it looks like it's his fault. But if you look at the
He was
coverage,
in
it's
man
not completely his
coverage.
fault. Not on all of them. Not on all of them. We played zone on some of those. And it looked like Deron Bland was getting
Zone,
burnt. He was not
zone.
responsible for DK. If you're basing it purely off stats, Deron Bland, didn't he break the record for most interceptions in a season? Or pick
No,
sixes at
most
least?
pick sixes.
At least pick, dude. That's production right there. That's points. It's not even interceptions. That's points on defense. Why is he not? If you're basing it only on stats, why is he not in the
Come on, it
conversation?
must. Cornerbacks are meant to get pick sixes, right?
Okay.
They're meant to guard somebody, pick off the ball, and run it back the other way.
And TJ Watt is meant to sack the quarterback.
And he does 19
And
times this
Deron
year.
Bland got more pick sixes than ever recorded in NFL history. I'm just saying, if you're going off what their job is and statistics specifically, then why
Well,
are you not? Why is Deron Bland not in the top 2 with TJ Watt?
I mean, you could make that point, but I feel like it's the yardage against him. I mean, that was the same argument why Trayvon Diggs didn't win it 2 years ago when he had 11 picks, because he gave up the most yards by any cornerback one in the league. And
I
Deron
think
Bland
unfortunately
let
we're
up a
going to
lot of
agree to disagree
yards.
on this one. I think we're going to agree to disagree
I
because
don't think I'll ever agree with
if
you
you
on
look
that.
at the defensive player award or any award for that matter, it's subjective. You can look at it 5 different ways, and someone could come in here and argue for each of the top 5 players that were in the nomination, and everyone could think that they're right, and nobody's going to agree. So you could have this argument for a year ongoing, and nobody's ever going to win this argument because it all depends on how you look at it. And based on the way I look at it, I'm biased. I've watched every Cowboys game. Micah Parsons deserves that award. You're going to say TJ Watt deserves that award. Some people that are Browns fans are going to say Myles Garrett actually deserves that award. So it all comes down to how you look at it. And yes, you may feel sour. I do too, a little bit. But at the end of the day, I don't think these rewards carry as much weight in reality because they're based off of people's opinions and it depends on how you look at it.
Yeah, I agree with that. But TJ did deserve it. We'll leave it at that.
We'll leave it at
Um,
that. No problem.
so moving on to more current matters, we're gonna look at the NFL free agency and some players and where we think they're gonna land. So big player here. There's a lot of drama surrounding this one. Justin Fields. Obviously, Bears have the number one pick via the Panthers, and there's drama around whether they'll draft Caleb Williams and trade Justin Fields away, or if they'll ride with the hot hand. Obviously, Justin Fields ended the season pretty well, and I know the city of Chicago is behind him. Um, but I'm not sure. I feel like, to me, with the number one overall pick and the hype that's been around Caleb Williams for the past 2, 3 years now, that Justin Fields will probably be traded prior to the draft. Um, there's been speculation that he might be going to Pittsburgh and that um, Art Rooney, Omar Khan, and Mike Tomlin are big fans of him. But I don't see him going to Pittsburgh. I feel like he will end up in Atlanta. Um, uh, it just kind of fits. They've been talking about that since during the season. Desmond Ritter is not the answer. So personally, me, I think Justin Fields will be traded to Atlanta prior to the draft.
That's a solid prediction. It might happen, but if you're asking for my thought on the subject matter, I don't think he should be traded under no circumstances. I'll give you my reasons. A, his performance at the end of the season was, I would say, above expectation. In addition, like you mentioned, he has the city already rallied around him. They would like to see him succeed as a Chicago Bears quarterback. In addition, by choosing not to draft Caleb Williams and sticking with Justin Fields, that's going to infuse so much confidence in him that the whole organization backs him up and they're not going to draft another quarterback and get rid of this guy. If they stick with him, his confidence is going to skyrocket and he's going to play for the city and he's going to play for the organization because he knows that people actually believe in him and they want to give him a real chance. He hasn't had a team around him. So use that number one pick on somebody else. Use the draft, use the free agency to build a team around him and give him a real shot because he's proven to make a little something out of nothing here at the end of the season with the Bears. Give him some more pieces and see what he can actually do. Because if I'm not mistaken, they drafted him pretty early a couple years ago. So clearly they saw something in him and he's shown signs of promise. I think you keep the guy, you give him a shot of confidence, and you give him half a team around him and see where it goes. Bears have nothing
Yeah,
to lose.
he did have a good connection with DJ Moore last year, and if they, I wouldn't expect them to keep the number one pick. I feel like they would trade out and get some, more draft capital, but not far out, probably to the 2 or 3 where they'd be able to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. and get another
There
weapon
you
for
go.
him. So I could see that happening. It really just comes down to what the Bears organization thinks. Caleb Williams has said that he doesn't want to play in Chicago. Excuse me. Um, but we've seen that in the past with other teams, with Eli Manning and John Elway,
Yeah.
and how that's played out. So we'll see. I could see him staying in Chicago, but I feel like if he was to be traded, his best fit would be in Atlanta. Next, Kirk Cousins, another quarterback. I really don't see Kirk anywhere outside of Minnesota this late in his career. Um, he's developed a bond with Justin Jefferson and the other players there. I just couldn't see him wearing any other jersey to end his career.
I agree with you. In my mind, he's either in Minnesota or he's a backup quarterback. I could see him as a
Mm.
backup quarterback for another team. Um, I don't see him starting for another organization other than Minnesota. I don't think, like you said, it's later in his career. He's dealt with a bunch of injuries. I don't think he's going to be able to adapt to a whole new system at this point in his career. I don't see it unless they build a team around him, which I don't think Kirk Cousins is the quarterback at this point in his career that a team's going to want to build their offense around. So he's either staying in Minnesota or he goes to another team and maybe he gets a shot to come in off the bench if their starting quarterback gets injured. I could see that being the case as well.
I don't know if I can completely agree with the backup quarterback take. I think Kirk still has potential to be a top 10 guy, even though he is in his mid 30s and is coming off a torn Achilles. Um, Obviously, he's going to start wearing down in the next couple of years, but I feel like an organization that just needs a guy like like Baker Mayfield was this year, like a bridge guy as a QB1 before they
Mayfield's a
draft
lot
somebody.
younger though, and he's dealt with a lot of different injuries. Cousins, I don't know. I don't think you can compare where Mayfield was to where Cousins is because Mayfield, that was kind of his last straw as a young player. Cousins, he's not in that same spot. I don't know if a team's going to look at Cousins in the same light that they looked at Mayfield, although he's been more successful overall in his career. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
Maybe.
I see him staying with Minnesota. I think that's what Justin Jefferson would want, and he's the face of that organization, so he's going to have a big say in that, I think. And if he left Minnesota, that would really leave them in a big QB hole, and
Yeah.
they don't have a high draft pick, so it's not really logical to me for Minnesota to let him walk. So
Yeah.
next
No,
one,
I think he should stay in Minnesota.
next one is simple. I think Baker Mayfield will definitely go back to Tampa. Um, I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that he will after bringing a team who was looking like they'd be at the bottom of the division to
Yep.
getting a wild card, or no, winning the division and beating the Eagles in the playoffs. I mean,
Yep.
that's so impressive to me. And he proved his worth. And, Tampa Bay is going to have a good quarterback if they re sign him.
Yeah. Baker Mayfield has a lot of positive qualities. I don't personally like him per se, but he's a solid quarterback. And coming out of college, there was a lot of hype around him. Clearly, it's for a reason. This opportunity he had with the Bucks was unique, and he made something of it. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. He deserves another season with the Bucks to see, you know, what else he can do.
Yeah, completely agree. Next guy, Chris Jones. He sat out this at the beginning of the season trying to get a new contract with more money. Now he's going into free agency, still hasn't gotten that big contract. Personally, I think the Chiefs are going to probably franchise tag him, which may cause some trouble, but I don't think Kansas City can afford to lose him. He's a game wrecker in the interior line, so I think he's going to get franchise tagged. Hopefully he doesn't sit out though.
He's unique. He's a special player. There's not a lot of guys like him in the league, but I don't think there's a team that's going to be willing to pay for him. And I think that he's going to stay with the Chiefs. They might end up franchise tagging him. That might be the best option for them, but I just don't see another team willing to pay what he wants. I don't see that happening. So I guess he's staying with the Chiefs. In some way,
Yeah,
shape, or form, I think he's going to stay in Kansas City.
yeah, not a lot of teams want to pay a huge sum of money for a D tackle. I mean, unless they are a game wrecker as big as Chris Jones. But
Yeah.
He is demanding a lot of money.
Yeah.
And he's not like Aaron Donald was in his prime when he
No.
won 3 depoys. So I don't know if other teams would want to spend that money. So I think the Chiefs will probably franchise tag him. Next one, a guy who will definitely be leaving is Russell Wilson. The Broncos have made it very clear that they don't want him there. Sean Payton and him were really butting heads last season, and it looks like he's going to be gone. Personally, to me, I think he will be coming to my Pittsburgh Steelers. Um, I've done a lot of research looking at which quarterback from free agency would be the best fit or in the draft. And personally, I feel like Russell Wilson is that guy, that veteran, that older presence that could, you know, keep it civilized in the locker room. Because last year there was a lot of drama between, you know, George Pickens and Deontay Johnson and some of the younger guys that want to get the ball. And I feel like a presence such as him will, be able to coach those guys up, let them know what they need to do. Same thing that Ben was able to do with those guys in his career. And also with the Steelers having a defensive coach in Mike Tomlin, who is going to be primarily focused on the defense, which always shows up in the big moments. Russ is really going to have that freedom on the offensive side of the ball to just sling the rock. He's got a jump ball receiver in George Pickens, and that's just kind of going to make it flow easier. Also, new OC and Arthur Smith. He's run heavy. He's not going to be asking Russ to throw the ball 50 times a game. So that's going to take a lot of the pressure off him. It just, in my eyes, makes so much sense for Russ to go to Pittsburgh.
I hadn't really thought about Russell Wilson. I knew he wasn't going to go back to the Broncos, obviously, but I just haven't thought about where he's going to go yet. And you sold me on the Steelers because it just makes a lot of sense. And I feel like that would be the perfect spot for him. I feel like the city would back him up. I feel like he would work well with Tomlin and that offense. Like they have pieces to work with, and you put a veteran quarterback in there to kind of just moderate things and work within his means and throw the ball, like you said, not 50 times a game, throw the ball a little bit less and just be a game manager. He has a good arm. He can be a game manager for a team like the Steelers, and I think that would make a lot of sense. So I'd be excited if he went there. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, good point there. And last guy, T. Higgins, was out this year with injury, didn't have the greatest year. I do still think he will stay in Cincinnati. There are a lot of teams out there that could use a guy like him as a wide receiver one. I definitely do think. I mean, if
As
you
a what?
watch if you watch Moss in games when Jamar Chase isn't playing, T. Higgins really steps up to bat and serves as that wide receiver one. But I think he's too valuable to Cincinnati to let him walk. Um, I think Cincinnati, once they get Joe Burrow fully healthy, T. Higgins fully healthy, and Jamar Chase fully healthy, that they'll be right back in the Super Bowl conversation from the AFC, back up at the top with Kansas City and Buffalo and Baltimore. So
I
that's
think
just
there's a
my
lot of yeah, I think there's a lot of questions around Cincinnati right now, given the year that they had. Obviously, they didn't have Burrow, but I think if Cincinnati wants to show that they are going to come back to where they were in the years prior, they're going to need to keep a player like T. Higgins. So we'll see what they do. Um, I just have a lot of question marks with Cincinnati right now, and I'm not very confident. But I think they need to keep T. Higgins if they want to show that they're going to push for where they used to be. So, yeah.
Yeah, completely agree. Well, that's going to do it here for the Stark Contrast podcast on this episode. Thank you for everybody who tuned in, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Have a good one.